The rain came down so hard that night it erased the streets of Chicago beneath a curtain of silver. Headlights blurred into glowing streaks. People rushed for cover without looking back, and one young woman collapsed onto the freezing sidewalk as if the weight of the entire world had finally become too much to carry. Hundreds passed by without stopping. Some glanced for a second before hurrying away. But one exhausted single father, carrying a bag of leftover food after finishing another long shift as a waiter, refused to leave her behind. That simple decision would change 2 lives forever, and just days later, his little daughter would look at a television screen and recognize the woman the entire country was talking about. If you believe that one act of kindness can completely change someone's life, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share this story with someone you care about, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that remind us hope still exists in this world. Michael Carter had never imagined his life would become so difficult. Living in Chicago, Illinois, he worked double shifts at a small neighborhood restaurant while raising his 8-year-old daughter, Grace, completely on his own after losing his wife several years earlier to a sudden illness. Every morning started before sunrise. Every evening ended long after dark, and every dollar he earned disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. Rent, groceries, school supplies, and medical bills constantly competed for his limited income. Even though exhaustion lived permanently on his face, Michael refused to let his daughter grow up believing life was only about hardship. Every night he smiled for Grace, helped her with homework, cooked simple dinners, and reminded her that kindness was something no amount of money could ever buy. That stormy evening, Michael finally finished cleaning tables after one of the busiest shifts of the month. The restaurant owner offered him leftover soup and bread to take home, knowing the single father appreciated every small blessing. As Michael walked toward the train station beneath his worn umbrella, he noticed what everyone else seemed determined not to see. A young woman lay unconscious beside a bus stop, completely soaked by the relentless rain. Her elegant clothes suggested she came from wealth, yet she looked completely abandoned. Without hesitation, Michael dropped his own belongings, knelt beside her, covered her with his jacket, and called for emergency medical help. The paramedics arrived quickly and rushed the woman to the nearest hospital. Before leaving, one nurse asked Michael if he knew her identity. He simply shook his head and explained that he was only someone passing by who could not ignore another human being in need. The nurse thanked him before the ambulance disappeared into the storm. Michael returned home hours later, soaked from head to toe and carrying nothing except the satisfaction that he had done the right thing. Grace noticed his empty jacket and worried about him, but when Michael explained why he had given it away, the little girl smiled proudly. She had learned from her father that compassion was never measured by convenience. The following days became even more difficult. Michael's restaurant reduced employee hours because business slowed after the storm. His paycheck shrank again, and overdue bills piled higher across the small kitchen table. Grace quietly noticed her father skipping meals so she could eat enough. She pretended not to notice because she knew he would never admit it. Despite everything, Michael continued working, believing that giving up would teach his daughter the wrong lesson. Every struggle became another opportunity to demonstrate courage instead of despair. Across the city, the mysterious woman slowly regained consciousness inside a private hospital room. Her name was Rebecca Collins, a successful investigative journalist whose reports had exposed powerful corruption across several states. For weeks, she had received threats warning her to stop her investigations. On the night of the storm, overwhelming stress, exhaustion, and dehydration caused her to collapse before reaching safety. Hospital staff explained that an unknown waiter had remained beside her until help arrived. Unfortunately, no one had recorded his full contact information before he quietly disappeared back into his ordinary life. Rebecca never forgot the stranger who had expected absolutely nothing in return. She instructed her television network to help locate him, but without a name or clear description, the search produced no answers. Days passed, and her recovery became national news because millions of viewers followed her investigations. Interviews filled television screens across America as people celebrated her return. One quiet evening, Michael and Grace sat together eating homemade soup while an evening news program played in the background. Grace suddenly froze, stared at the television, and pointed excitedly toward the screen. The smiling journalist giving an interview was wearing Michael's old brown jacket, the same one he had wrapped around the unconscious woman during the storm. Grace immediately remembered the missing jacket hanging over the hospital stretcher only days earlier. Her eyes filled with excitement as she realized the famous woman everyone admired was the same person her father had rescued without knowing her name. Grace encouraged Michael to contact the television station, but he hesitated. He never helped people hoping for recognition. Their reunion took place inside the same restaurant where Michael worked. Rebecca arrived carrying the carefully cleaned jacket that had protected her during the storm. Tears filled her eyes as she thanked the humble waiter who had quietly walked away after saving a complete stranger. She admitted that his compassion restored her faith during one of the darkest moments of her life. She had spent years reporting heartbreaking stories about injustice, yet the greatest story she had ever experienced came from an ordinary father struggling to survive. Rebecca soon learned about Michael's daily sacrifices, his devotion to Grace, and the financial burdens threatening their future. Rather than simply offering money, she shared his story during a nationally televised special about everyday heroes whose quiet acts of kindness often went unnoticed. Millions of Americans watched the broadcast. Messages of encouragement flooded in from every state. Local businesses offered scholarships for Grace's education. Restaurant customers began visiting specifically to support Michael. Community members organized donations that allowed him to pay overdue bills and finally move into a safer apartment. More importantly, Michael received an unexpected opportunity from Rebecca's network. Knowing his calm character and inspiring outlook, she recommended him as a community outreach coordinator for several charitable projects connected to the station. The position offered stable income, regular hours, and enough time for Michael to finally enjoy evenings with his daughter instead of constantly working overtime. Life slowly transformed, not because of fame, but because genuine kindness inspired countless strangers to help someone who had never asked for anything. Michael continued teaching Grace that every blessing carried responsibility. Together they volunteered at shelters, served meals during winter storms, and reminded people that compassion often begins with noticing the person everyone else chooses to ignore. Rebecca continued exposing corruption, but she frequently shared Michael's story whenever audiences asked whether ordinary people could still make a difference. She always answered by remembering one rainy night in Chicago when a tired waiter chose humanity over convenience. Before this story ends, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and share one act of kindness that changed your own life or someone else's. Your story could inspire another person who desperately needs hope today. As the years passed, Grace never forgot the moment she recognized the woman on television. That memory became proof that goodness never truly disappears, even when it seems unnoticed. Sometimes the smallest decision made in the darkest storm echoes across countless lives in ways no one could ever predict. Michael never became wealthy beyond imagination, but he gained something far greater. He gave his daughter a living example of integrity. Rebecca regained hope because of one stranger's compassion, and an entire nation remembered that heroes do not always wear uniforms or stand beneath bright lights. Sometimes they carry food home after a long shift, stop in the pouring rain, and quietly choose kindness when nobody else does. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and let it remind you that your next act of kindness may become the miracle someone else never saw coming.